supplying the place, objects, props, and some guidance for action, really. So he was talking about one important fact, which is the role of artist as a facilitator rather than creator. So according to him, artists should facilitate an action and let the audience complete that action or that work of art, if you wish. So he was providing, for example, an empty space with lots of props and material in it, and then sometimes with some vague instruction, and it was up to the audience how they want to interact with these materials within this space. So it was all about interaction with the material being provided by artists, with the participation of the audience, which refers to what I mentioned, a very important fact that artists should be a facilitator rather than a creator. Second important hallmark toward this direction that we are going to have today, to the idea of audience as an active subject in art, in contemporary art, was the Fluxus movement, which we briefly talked about it in previous lectures. As you can see, Fluxus was an international network of artists. It was not relied on nations or continents, European or American. It was international, and that was the main difference between this movement and the other movement that we see in the art history. It was an international network of artists, composers, and designers noted for blending, and musicians as well, noted for blending different artistic media and disciplines in the 1960s, began around the same time. Fluxus emphasized ephemeral actions made by the artist and playful intervention of the audience in the pieces. So this ephemeral and temporal action, they emphasized that in order to talk about the permanent role of the audience in the piece, that the piece could not be completed without the audience. The role of artists and their action is just temporal, it's ephemeral. If you remove artists from this context, then that work is not finished. That work will actually disappear. It moves away. After a few years, no one will hear about that work if you remove the role of audience from this equation. That was their main practice. They started to design variety of performances and musical pieces, which was heavily relied on this idea, the role of audience, and also activating the audience and talking about the action coming from the audience. The artists who were involved, the main artists who were involved in this group, we talked about all of them. We saw some examples of them. John Cage was one of them, Yoko Ono, another famous artist belonged to this group and this movement, and also Nam June Paik, which saw many works of the Korean American artists. See some examples of their works. Yoko Ono, this piece that she made by actually the means of publication, she published this work in a book. The recent publication of it, the title of the book is called Grapefruit, which contains, as you can see, sets of instructions. That's the whole piece. The sets of instructions, these scripts or instructions could be performed or imagined in the mind of the viewer. So it's up to the viewer how they are going to perform this. If they want to just imagine them or think about different materials and objects in order to make these performances happen, or just actually doing it practically in the scene. There were lots of shows and installations in galleries and museums that the audience tried to actually make this happen, and that was the main idea behind this work in the gallery or in the museum. So you would see that in this work specifically, she neglected one of those important part of the message that we were discussing in the communication slide. She denied the rules of form and medium both at the same time. According to standardized rules of art, of visual art, this cannot be considered as art. This is a piece of text. This could be literature. This could be poetry. This cannot be considered as a work of art. So she denied, deflected that rule, that limitation that we were talking about, and as the result, the idea and content became liberated. The audience could conceive this content or generate this idea of content in any way that they want. Exactly similar to that diagram that So I'm going to read some of these as an example. For example, one of them is called painting to be stepped on. Leave a piece of canvas or finish painting on the floor or in the street. That was just instruction. So it's up to the audience how they're going to do that. Or laugh piece. Keep laughing for a week. In another piece, which is more famous than previous one, that's called Cut Piece. It's a performance that she actually made multiple times throughout different years with different props and sets. But in most of them, the consistent thing in all of those performances was herself sitting on the stage, usually with a table that was full of different scissors on it. So the audience could come to the stage, pick one of those scissors, and cut her clothes. So the direction that performance would go was merely relied on the participation of the audience. She was usually keep doing this until all of her clothes were actually being stripped off or moved away. In her own interpretation or in her own word, what she wanted to do was to actually cut the influence and kind of like the glamorous position of the artist into something passive, which is being shaped by the presence of the audience. The artist herself would be shaped out by the participation of the audience. It's up to the decision of the audience how they define the artist, the presence of the artist. By cutting her clothes, which is one of the main components of the identity of all of us, the way that we choose our clothes, by cutting those pieces out and then shape the new artist in any way that they want. But beside that connotation that she was talking about in the history of art, they refer to this work as one of the most important part of feminist art movement, and how this work was so influential for some of the theories that feminist artists were talking about. Just remember the influence and importance of what we discussed last week with these pieces. This was also an interactive piece by Yoko Ono, wherein she invited audience to add color to this empty canvas. So she had that empty canvas attached to the wall in the gallery, and then she had this chair, and she put some acrylic paints and a brush on this chair. There was a small instruction attached to the wall asking the audience to add color to this painting. So she played the role of a facilitator, as we mentioned. She just provided the material for the audience, and it was up to the audience how they were going to shape up that work through their participation. This is another piece called the Ceiling Painting, which is actually the introduction of her relationship with John Lennon. So John Lennon visited this exhibition and for the first time visited Yoko Ono, and that was the start point of their relationship, their long-term relationship. So there was an empty canvas attached to the ceiling, and as you can see here, there was a chain attached to this canvas, and the other side of the chain was a magnifier, a loop. And then there was a ladder underneath, so it was up to the audience how they were going to interact with this piece. Obviously, this installation, this set, would be an instruction. It invites the audience to use the loop and investigate the canvas, but it is up to the audience if they want to go up the ladder and use that loop or magnifier in order to investigate and empty, assuming the empty canvas, apparently. But when you were kind of like adventurous enough to just go up and use the loop and investigate that empty surface, you would realize that there is one small board that is being painted on that canvas that says yes. It's very small that you can hardly see it with your eye. And that was the painting. The whole painting was an empty canvas with just one word painted on it, yes, by the artist. So this process, this interaction with the painting, with the work of art and audience, was the main subject matter of this piece, not this painting. The idea behind this piece was that interaction. And that's the famous quote by John Lennon that he made when he made this piece, and talking about how positive this piece was for him and how he felt very other example from Fluxus movement, we saw this performance before. The 4 minutes 33 second piece by John Page, and you saw that how important is the role of audience in that piece. There is no melody or tone or sound actually in this piece except the sound of the audience and the participants. This piece, this musical piece, is being made by the audience and the sounds that they create in the space, whether intentionally or toward an unintentional kind of a process of adding sound to the whole piece.
You can do that here, right?
Exactly, and it is happening every day actually. Someone is coughing, someone, the sound of your phones and your texting will actually be a participation of you in this class somehow. So, all these three trends and movements that we saw, situationist, international, Fluxus movement, and also the trends of happening, they, as I mentioned, they were heavily focusing or emphasizing this fact that the work of art is not complete unless the audience would enter to the scene. The work of art becomes complete by the participation or engagement, actually, of the audience. That was the main idea behind all of these movements from 50s, 60s, up to the beginning of 21st century. When we talk about the active role or active dialogue of the audience, that's the main idea behind it in all of these works. The work is not being complete unless the audience enters to this equation. However, at the beginning of 21st century, in 1997, this guy, Nicola Boglio, he wrote an article called The Relational Aesthetic. Later on, he developed that article and he wrote a whole book about this theory, the theory of relational aesthetic. Wherein instead of, as you can see here, relying on this idea that usually those three trends and movements were actually exemplifying in their works, instead of talking about the completion of the work of art by the viewer, as we saw before, he was talking about the viewer. And he named the viewer participants in all of his theories and books. And their interactions with the work as something that becomes the work itself rather than completing the work. So the audience and their interaction with the work is the main work itself. It's not the objects that artist is being presented or facilitator is being presented in the gallery. It's not that empty canvas. The artwork is not that empty canvas that Yuko Ono presented in the gallery. The artwork is the audience herself or himself engaging with that or participating in creation of that work. So that was the main focus that he made. And although it may not seem to be important, this difference, but we are going to see why it becomes important, this difference between audience completing the work or audience becoming the artwork themselves. He defined relational aesthetic as an artist-constructed social experience. So that's the process of art making in his mind. And he talked about it as an artist-constructed social experience. Still, we have the role of facilitator from the artist side, but that facilitation is mainly relied on the social experience. This is important. The social experience should be the main context, according to him, of this facilitation. The reason why the social experience is important, and this is very important, that why the social experience is very important in this theory. The reason for that is that he, inside that article, he claimed a new thing, and that's the reason for this social experience becoming very important. That theory was claiming that in contemporary capitalist work, similar to what Gegenwart said somehow, in contemporary capitalist work, the capitalism or the state, the dominant state, instead of trying to focus on the means of production and consumption, these days they are trying to control the means of communication. And that was the biggest theory that they developed, which influenced most of the works that could be somehow related to this idea of relational aesthetic. That capitalist society, and it is a political actually theory that he was developing, similar to what Gator was developing, talking about the situation of contemporary society and the situation of media in contemporary society, and how government and contemporary state tries to control people, control the mass by controlling the means of communication. Because according to this theory and according to neoliberal theories in political science, the government could control both of those previous actions, which would be production and consumption, by controlling communication. So production and consumption would be embedded inside communication because it happens through communication in the contemporary and the modern world. With the development of social media, with the development of internet, and different means of communication through different kind of TV shows, movies, films, reality TV shows, and we see the effects of it in our political atmosphere today as well. But all means of controlling and surveillance would happen through communication, and how governments would modify the templates for this communication and the media for this communication. And that was the main discussion that he developed. For that reason, social experience, which offers a direct interaction, personal interaction between people, becomes important. A non-mediated interaction or communication among people becomes important. So if, with Gatebor's idea in the society of the spectacle, just drifting to the city without paying attention to any sign, paying attention to any direction, paying attention to any laws, if this is the way to fight back the society of consumption, or the state that relies on consumption, with the society of communication, the way to fight back, or the practice that we should have according to him, is to rely on direct and unmediated communication or interaction with people around us in the community. That's why social experience is very important, and that's how he developed this theory. According to him, and you could see this in this communication chart as well, the same thing happens here. If you want to rely on this interaction or communication in order to liberate the message from these limits, you need to actually make this interaction that happens equal from both sides in order to have an active dialogue and active communication without any mediated form in between. So he suggested these three things in that article and this book in order to achieve that goal. And after that, he started to bring up some examples of artworks and artists who are actually creating and making work based on these three things. And in all of the examples that you're going to see from now till the end of the session, contemporary examples, you're going to track down and see the presence of either one, two, or all three of these important key components that Nicolas Bouillot developed in the theory of relational aesthetic. The first one is authorship, which we discussed it. All three of them, we discussed them at the beginning of this session. Authorship, the democratic gesture of foregoing some or all authorial control, which causes various shifts in artist audience role. It's clear based on the discussion that we had so far. Activation, the desire to create an active subject that is empowered by physical engagement and social interaction. Again, it's very clear. He was suggesting that if you want to activate that message that is being limited by the rules and form, then we need to rely on physical engagement and social interaction in order to remove that barrier or that mediated object in between of the interaction. If this happens, then several things start to become activated. The body would be activated, the space would be activated, the interaction would be activated, the identity would be activated, the material would be activated. They all become an important part of the work itself. The audience themselves, the material itself, and everything that you see around the work will become an important part of the work. And finally, community. Restoration of human relations and cultural values by introducing social experiences as art making. So any form of social experience, any form of interaction and contact that happens within the context of society, that happens within this context, I spoiled the surprise. Within this context, social, historical, and cultural, every form of communication that happens within that context will actually activate is community. And that's why that third element I mentioned at the beginning of the session, that third element is very important in this equation of active dialogue. We are going to see some words now that are heavily relied on these three elements, and I want you to, from now on, I want you to try and track down few of these or all of these in the words that I'm going to show you. It's very important to be self-aware when you look at this word. If you look at it at the surface, in some of these words that we're going to see today, if you just look at it from a very narrow perspective, the word may not be meaningful to you. It may be so cheap and cheesy and not important. But if you try to look at it from this perspective, this important theory which influenced philosophy, even psychology relies on relationalistic a lot, contemporary psychology, that influenced lots of areas.